Hello, everybody. I am back this week with a fun expert here that I think will be really helpful to the audience when it comes to their relationships with their family, with their friends, with everybody. Erin Woodruff is here. She's a communication coach, helping people stay happily married while finding themselves and creating a life that they thrive in. So, Erin, thank you for being here. I'm excited to have you on and talk about communicating, which is like the foundation of everything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Tell us how you got into being a communications coach, because I feel like we hear a lot of like various types of coaches, but I feel like
Mhm.
you're probably what everybody needs before they even move
I
on
think
to
so
like a
too.
good coaching.
Yeah, I would think so too. Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for all the work that you do in the space of military work, like bringing people together, and thanks for serving anyone who's listening. Thanks for serving. I know that's Amy's audience. I don't fall in that demographic, so I'm so grateful. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And there's so many other people like me who appreciate you more than you know.
That's
So
kind
I
to
just
say.
want to
Thank
add
you.
that. But as far as me getting into communications, I've always loved it. I actually did get a degree in strategic communications when I was at college. And so I've always just been really interested in how I like psychology too, but I really like less about how the brain works and more about how we interact with other people and just how do we communicate what's actually going on in our minds and in our bodies. And like, there's so much ambiguity here. And I have definitely gone through tons of, miscommunication in my own life because communication is hard, life is hard. And then being able to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and being able to help other people has always just been super like my biggest driver. I want others to be able to articulate and communicate how they're feeling and the things that they actually want to do in life, be able to have hard conversations, feel like they can open up and be vulnerable, and so many other things. So I started coaching about 2 years ago and I've been doing it ever since, and I've just loved it. It's been so much fun.
That's awesome. What kinds of like clients do you find yourself typically coaching?
So my niche is specifically with high achieving extroverted women married to introverts.
Such a
So
specific niche.
it's very specific. And it's so I really talk a lot about communication styles when it comes to extroverts and introverts. And this can be across the board. It's so applicable to other relationships that we have, not just romantic ones, but it can be with other familial or our neighbors or our coworkers, so many others. And so that's where I find myself in communication a lot. Just how do we communicate with people when extroverts say, I don't know, 10 times as many words as introverts? And how can we like bridge the gaps and communicate and listen and understand and all of that? And it's messy. It's a messy space to be in, but it's also has a lot of beauty in there when you start pulling it apart and you can start finding some change, making some changes and finding answers in your relationship.
No, that's awesome. I think having knowing the difference between the two and how it can be, somebody is just like those communication styles are so different from each other. Like that can really
Mhm.
be hard. And like you said, not just in your like romantic relationship, but in your friendships or um,
Mhm.
neighbors and other people in your community and in your life. So
Yeah.
we need you to tell us how to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, what
um,
do you want to know?
yeah. So like let's say so I took your quiz, which I thought was really fun, which we'll put a
Oh,
link to in the
good.
show notes. It was like super fast. And I got ambivert, which is like
In
both
between.
in
Mhm.
between, which I feel like I'm literally middle of the road everything in my life. So I'm like, I wish I was like one way or the other sometimes to like help me more. But um, what is like the biggest key takeaway to help somebody that is maybe super extroverted and a friend is a little bit like shyer or more introverted, or maybe it's their spouse or a friend or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I specifically talk towards extroverts, and one thing that I always encourage and remind them is your introvert partner or friend or coworker, they are so different from you, and you need to understand the differences, but the number one thing is don't expect them to ever say as many words as you. I think too often we're trying to push the introverts way past their comfort zone or even the necessary zone of like they don't feel the need to talk. They just don't. All the introverts that I know in my life, a lot of them will talk in very small groups, but a lot of them just don't feel the need to just like think out loud or just talk to fill the silence. Extroverts are not that way. Extroverts process information verbally. We fill the room and the silence with noise. We talk. And so just being able to acknowledge that you can sit in silence and you can be okay with that, that has been like a huge learning thing for me that I can sit in silence because I like to talk a lot. But if I can sit in silence, what can I learn about the other person? What can I observe? What can I hear if I'm not talking?
Mm.
And so that's like the first thing I always try to put in people's minds that there's nothing wrong with the way someone else communicates. It's just very different. So how can you either adapt to some of it, but also more importantly, stop trying to make them more extroverted than they want to be?
That's a really good point. I think we hear that a lot of like bringing the introverts out of their shell or like getting people that maybe are just super quiet or reserved to like be bolder and like that's just not who they are. So that's a good reminder
Mhm.
for us. When it does come to talking though, and we're like meeting new people, especially in like a military lifestyle or anyone really, if you move
Mhm.
a lot or if you're just having to like reestablish friend groups, you're having to meet new people or you start a new job,
Mhm.
whatever it might be, what are some good questions to ask to like get to know someone to kind of figure out maybe the best way they communicate or just to like get to know them as a person on a like deeper level?
Yeah, those are really great questions. I Well, it depends on who we're talking about. I'll just use neighbors because I know you're talking about like being the hostess of your home. So let's just use the example of neighbors or close friends that live nearby. And I think a big part of it is, especially if you're moving, it's hard to always be the one who goes first. But if you can just almost embody that identity of like, I'm always the person who goes first. I'm the first person to walk across the street and knock on the door and introduce myself. I'm the first person to host a party in my neighborhood. I'm the first person to ask a question. I think it is an uncomfortable spot to be in, but it also is super empowering because you get to be the one that sets the precedent for the relationship and for the community feel. If you're trying to get to know your neighbors and build friendships, everyone wants a friend. So if you can just kind of embody that and know I can do it in my own way, whatever that looks like. If you want to take cookies, if you just want to wave across the street and you don't actually want to go meet them, but understanding kind of what are you looking for. I always encourage people to start with themselves first, because if you can start with yourself, then meeting other people is actually way easier. And finding those questions to ask people is way easier because you can even, and I've done this recently in my neighborhood. I moved into a new neighborhood during COVID.
Mhm.
So
Worst time.
yeah, worst time. So it's almost been 3 years, but with so much upheaval, I'm still getting new neighbors in my neighborhood and I'm still getting to know people. And this summer, well, at the beginning of this year, one of my New Year's resolutions was to make more friends in my closer proximity because I didn't feel like I had many. So I've been, again, everything I'm saying is our stuff that I've practiced of assuming that role of I can go first. I can be the first neighbor to host a party. I can be the first neighbor to walk across the street. And as I've done that, I've met neighbors that I have never met before. We've lived across the street for 2 years and have never met. So it takes a lot of courage, but being able to say, okay, this is something I actually want to do because it's important to me. When you walk across the street, you can say, we've lived across the street for 2 years, and I figured I'd finally come over and introduce myself. I know it's a little overdue, but I would really like to get to know you. And when you can start a conversation with honesty, because that just shows humanness of like, it's not a secret that you guys have been living across the street for
Yeah.
2 years.
Like they know you live there.
Yeah. And you've probably seen each other. And so I think too often we don't talk about the elephant in the room. And that's one of the elephants in the room is we've lived across the street. Maybe it's been 10 years for somebody that's listening. And just to be able to say, I actually want to get to know them, or I want to have a friend, or I need someone to get a package for me while I'm out of town, something as simple as that, then it gives you a reason to go meet somebody. It gives you a reason to connect with somebody. And then you also know why you're doing that. And that helps a lot rather than just like, oh, people say get to know my neighbors, but I don't really want to.
Yeah. I love what you say about going first and how it does take courage and it can be scary a lot of times, but I love that you said that it allows you to lead and it empowers you and it sets the tone. And like I mean, this maybe sounds bad, but like who doesn't want the upper hand in a conversation or in a
Mhm.
relationship of being like, not I'm in charge, but like I've started this so I can like take it in the direction I want it to go.
Mhm.
That sounds bad, like I'm in charge, but you kind of are if you're the first person to start that relationship. But
Mhm.
I love that it really does just take a little bit of courage once to like start that relationship or that conversation or whatever it is, and it can really turn into something amazing. Um,
Mhm.
when we are talking and communicating with others and we're, in our friend group or maybe it's a new group that we're in, I know you talk about communicating with confidence a lot. Maybe we're
Mhm.
a little bit unsure because we're new or
Mhm.
we're just a little bit more reserved or something like that. How can we build our confidence when it comes to like breaking into that new group or communicating with others that maybe we've not been taking the lead with previously?
That's a really great question. One of the biggest things is, how is your self-talk? Again, I'm huge on just looking inside before you can speak confidently outside. Because if you're telling yourself, I'm so awkward, they're not going to like me, I'm the newbie here, then the way you're going to speak will not be as confident. Versus if you're telling yourself similar things, but in a different way of, I'm the new person here, and this might be an opportunity to make a new friend. I want to see how many things I can find in common with people while I'm out. I want to read a book so I can bring it up in a conversation. I listen to this podcast and I love podcasts. They're so popular. And if you're listening and you're listening to this podcast, this is a great opportunity for you to say, I listened to this podcast about communicating with friends. And I think I want to become a little bit better at communicating. I kind of want a friend to talk about cooking with, or I want a friend that wants to do a book group with me. And using this podcast you're listening to is a great conversation starter. It's something that you've consumed that you can now share with someone else. So lean into the things that you're already comfortable with, the things that you're interested in, and then that is where the confidence is going to come from naturally, because you're leaning into your own intuition rather than letting other people drive the conversation. And going back to the control piece, right? It's not about controlling, but it's about you feeling comfortable. Because if they never talk about anything that you know anything about, it's really hard to join in.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I can think back a few years ago when I just started consuming a bunch of like personal development stuff, productivity stuff, time management stuff. And it was so interesting of being like, now that I've consumed some of these things, I had things to talk about with other people that, like you said,
Mhm.
I felt knowledgeable about because I had listened to the podcast or I had read the book or whatever it was. Um, and not that I think everybody should just be consuming all the time, but it
Yeah.
is good. It is good to like, find some things you're interested in, read up on them or listen up on them or whatever. And that way you do have something that you're like, I know in this group or in this conversation, like I have my like three back pocket like things that I'm really knowledgeable about or I feel comfortable with. And I can share that information. I like how you're saying to kind of like flip your perspective of like I'm not this isn't going to work because I'm new, but like how can I challenge myself because I'm new? And
Mhm.
I love that. Like it was a drive-by comment, but I feel like we all need to go back to it of like, I'm going to find 5 things I have in common with this person. What like
Mhm.
a simple challenge to give yourself whenever you're in a new place of like really being intentional about your time with a new person to be like, okay, I'm going to find something 3 things I have in common or 3 places that we've both been or whatever it might be. And like,
Mhm.
just have that in the back of your mind of like this challenge whenever I am meeting a new person.
Mhm.
I think that's really cool that I hopefully will put to use in the future. So
Yeah. And
I thought,
on top of that challenge, I'll just offer, for me, it has changed a lot because I don't want to dive into this at all, but just the political polarization in the US is really intense. And when we meet new people, especially if someone has an opinion that isn't your opinion, it's really hard. It's really easy to either start arguing with them right away or just decide you don't want to be friends with them. So I have started to adopt the idea that I have way more in common with someone than I do difference. And even on the political spectrum, if you look at opinions, the reasons why underneath the opinions, the reasons are actually the same. We want to protect our kids. We want to live in a country that's free. We want to be happy. We want to be with our families. All of these things. And so focus not on the differences that you have, but going back to that challenge of what can we talk about that's actually connecting us, that's actually similar? How are we the same? And that has changed the way I view conversations with people, especially when I feel like we don't have anything in common, to realize, oh, they're scared and afraid just like I am in a different way. But being able to even bond over that is important. And there's so much that we have in common, way more than we realize.
yeah, I think if everybody just did that a little bit more, it would be a much better
Yeah.
world. Like we are all
Yes.
so similar. We need to focus on that.
Mhm.
Yeah. I know recently one of the things that we connected with online was like you had some moments of feeling kind of like lonely and isolated, having nothing to look forward to in the winter. I think you live in Utah, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so winters can be harsh.
Yeah.
And you solved that problem by inviting your neighbors over. Can you talk to us a little bit about this gathering? What did you learn from hosting this party? Like how it all happened? Because I think it's just such a cool thing that happened.
Yeah, and I met you online right after I hosted this party. So, y Amy mentioned I live in Utah. I don't know how the rest of the country fared this winter, but Utah this year had record-breaking snowpack. So it was just a never-ending winter. The skiers and the snowboarders were so happy, and everyone else was miserable. And in March, typically when it starts to get warm and you can start spending more time outside, the winter wasn't ending, and I was really kind of going through the second wave of winter blues, and I was just really depressed and lonely, discouraged. And I have a toddler, and there's not that much you can do with a toddler in the winter. And one day I was walking, it was freezing outside, but we're like, we're gonna go on a walk outside. So I drug my toddler outside and it was freezing and I kept telling myself, this is so awful. I'm so cold. I'm so miserable. And again, going back to the self-talk, how do you think I was feeling? I was feeling awful. And I was just thinking, I just want it to be summer. I see so many more of my neighbors when it's warm outside because everyone's outside. And I realized I was lacking that social piece. I hadn't seen my neighbors for a long time. So as I was walking around my neighborhood, I started looking at all of the houses and I started asking myself questions of, I wonder if she's just as miserable as I am. She just had a new baby. I wonder how she's doing. And like as I the more houses I walked by, the more I thought about the people inside and realized they're probably all just as miserable as I am. And
Yeah.
it was really one of those telling moments of I'm so consumed in my own misery that I'm not even looking for a way to connect with someone else. So I got home from that walk and I decided to throw me and my neighbors a party because I needed something to look forward to. And I made a little invite and I hosted a favorite things party, and I can talk about what that is, but I've always wanted to go to a favorite things party and I've never been invited to one, so I hosted one.
That's the best. Like if you want to do something, just host it yourself. Like that's yeah, and then
Exactly.
you get to do it.
So, yeah, and so I made this little invite and I decided I'm hosting this a week from today. I'm gonna give people a week. It's like not too far, not too soon. And I live on a corner of the cul-de-sac, and so I invited everyone that lives in the cul-de-sac behind me and everyone that lived on either side and across the street. And I sent out this little invite with kind of outlining what a favorite things party is, and then I told them I need something to look forward to. So please join me for this party and come and meet friends. I've invited all of our neighbors, so you'll be in good company. And then I added at the end, feel free to bring a neighbor or a friend, even if they don't know who I am or if I don't know them. And it was so much fun. This whole party was so much fun. We So about 16 people came. 3 of the guests didn't know me, and I didn't know them. So my neighbors did their work in bringing friends, but then a lot of my neighbors were inviting each other too, and it was really, really fun. And I'll give a very brief overview of what a favorite things party is. A favorite things party, essentially, the invite said, go and buy 3 of the same item, no more than $10 each, so you're not spending more than $30, and bring all 3 items to the party unwrapped. At the party, we'll draw names, we'll talk about our favorite things, we'll draw names, and then at the end of the night, you'll go home with 3 new items, 3 favorite items from friends. So it was like a gift exchange and also a favorite things party. Everyone got to introduce themselves and talk and share one favorite thing, which was really good for a group of people that didn't really know each other because they had something to talk about. And
Yeah.
even when people arrived, it started from the beginning of what did you bring to this party and what's your favorite thing, even when people didn't know who they were. So I felt like it gave that foundation of instant commonality because everyone was there for a favorite things party.
Yeah, there's like a common theme and a common goal of
Mhm.
like, this is what we're doing. We don't have to come up with a bunch of small talk or whatever. We can like
Yeah.
talk about this goal that we're doing. That sounds
Yeah.
so, so fun. I'll let you finish in a second. I just wanted to touch on your invitation. I love how honest you were in your invitation of not only saying like, here's the directions of how we're going to do this party, but like bring friends. I need something to look forward to. Like, come enjoy this with me. Um, and how you said like these are the people we're inviting so that you're in good company. I think maybe sometimes when we do get an invitation that's not expected necessarily, we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to go because I don't know who's going to
Mhm.
be there. So it's
Exactly.
nice that you said like, this is who's coming or who's invited. You're
Mhm.
all in good company and like help me enjoy life in this miserable winter.
Yeah.
So no,
Mhm.
I love that. If we can take something away, I think like having that honest invitation. I think I get hung up sometimes on the aesthetics of things and I'm like, I don't want to put all that information on there because it won't look great,
Yeah.
but
Well,
who cares about that? So
that's I will say because I also am aesthetically pleasing of how I wanted to do it. So I made the invitation really beautiful, and I can give you the PDF so you can link it in the show notes so
yeah.
anyone listening can go look at it. But so I made the invitation very beautiful with the instructions of the party, and then it was actually the text that I sent with the invitation that was a lot like, I just need something to look forward to. I'm lonely. I'm sad. Come party with me. So it was very fun. It was very, very fun.
What are some things that like really surprised you about your neighbors that maybe you didn't know or like the people they brought? Like, did you see connections having been made that night that like you're continuing still now or into the future?
Yes. So we're in May, end of May when we're recording this. So the party was about 2 months ago, give or take, but one of the ladies who was there, she's a photographer and she's gotten business from that party.
That's
People
amazing.
who were there have said, will you take my family photos? Will you take my portraits for my business? And so she's gotten business from the party, but also I've just seen my neighbors connecting outside more, and it's been like so rewarding because that's what my goal was to create a community of people, not because I need it, but because we need it. And
Yeah.
subsequently, I have also greatly benefited, but it was so much fun to bring together just if anyone in any neighborhood, you're going to have the most random people living there. And I love the fact that at my party, I had such a variety of ages and just life experiences, but my 80-year-old neighbor was there and her husband was currently in the hospital for some health problems and she came and she had a great time. And my neighbor who's in her 20s who just had a new baby 3 weeks before, she came and was a night away from her newborn. And there were two of the guests that came actually were from Ukraine. And one of them has lived in the US for 8 years, and then the other one just moved here 2 months ago. And they're living together in a house, and it's kind of like a whole family living, like multi-generational family living in a house in the US. And as they were leaving, one of the Ukrainian friends, she came up to me, and the one who's only been here for 2 months, she gave me a big hug and she said, I've never gone to anything like this in my entire life. This was so much fun.
Oh, that's the
And
best.
I know, and I just like, I was just on a high of so much joy and gratitude and enjoyment with these ladies. So there were so many wonderful things that had happened, but I'm still seeing the ripple effects of it now, especially now that it's warm outside. People are using each other's names, and I'm like, that's so cool that that was the result of something that was really insignificant for me at overall when we're talking about everything. It really was just one party that lasted for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's made such a huge difference in all of our lives.
That is so, so cool. I love how, like you said, it didn't take a lot of time. It probably didn't take a ton of effort, and it's going to carry on throughout the neighborhood for such a long time from now. And the fact that you said like people are using each other's names, that is so huge. It's like such a simple thing. But when you
Mhm.
don't know someone's name and they don't know yours, it like the communication is a lot harder. So you're like worried you're gonna like forget their
Mhm.
name or you don't know it, so you don't want to say it. And it's just like it's such a simple thing. If you could just remember everybody's name or
Yeah.
know it, like it's so
Mhm.
helpful. Um, Something I want to talk to you about. I appreciate you sharing that story, and I hope it really encourages people to like take a look through their neighborhood and figure out a way to like connect people because it really is so beneficial. Something else I wanted to talk to you about is hard conversations. And I think
Yeah.
as a communications coach, you probably got some really great wisdom to share with us. But in my experience of like moving around a lot, you have to have a lot of hard conversations with various friend groups, maybe like friend groups aren't really like what you thought they were and you might have to back out, or you just you're moving on or you're in different parts of your life, so having these kind of hard conversations, or maybe you have differing opinions like you were saying. So what
Mhm.
are some key points for us to remember when we have to have those conversations to maybe make it a little bit easier?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I love talking about conflict resolution and having hard conversations. And the number one thing I want to encourage anyone is to remember that if you can keep in mind that your goal is to ultimately end on the other side of the problem together, it's not a war that you're fighting against each other, but you are working on the problem together, regardless of what it is, then you being able to treat them with so much love and respect is way easier. And vice versa. If you go into a hard conversation feeling defensive or aggressive or angry or resentful, they're automatically going to pick up on that. But if you can go in with love and vulnerability and compassion and even determination of like, this is actually a problem we've got to figure out, but I need you on my team. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not here to be against you. This is a problem that we have, and I need your help. And we might not agree. We might not see eye to eye, but I love you. And regardless on your relationship, and where I talk about romantic relationships, tell your partner, like, I love you so much and I want to make this work out for us. But we need to be able to talk about it. And I don't want to bring it up to start a fight. I don't want to fight about this. This is not my intention, but we need to move through this hard thing together, because if we don't go together, it's going to be so much harder. So will you come with me? And yeah, I'll end there, and that's a lot to unpack just there.
Well, I just love what you said. Like the thing that stuck out to me is like it's not war. It's not one versus the other. It's you have to get across that finish line together. And that is,
Mhm.
I mean, I know in like spousal relationships, like it does seem that way. Sometimes it's like, I'm right,
Mhm.
you're wrong, and there's no like getting through that. But if you can remember like there's finish line and we have to both be on that same side, I think that's really helpful. And no matter what kind of relationship you're having, and having that conversation is like it's not one versus the other. We just it's a team. That's really great
Mhm.
advice. um Before we get into our last call questions, I want to say that I've loved everything you've talked about, and I think you've given us a lot of nuggets to take away from and apply to our lives and our relationships. Just feel free to share where everybody can find you, and learn more from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, you can find me online on all the social media platforms. I'm Erin Woodruff Coaching, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can find me on any of those platforms. Feel free to send me a message, or you can find me on my website, erinwoodruffcoaching.com.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. I do want to mention like, that quiz was really fun to take. So feel
Yeah,
free to
and the
take that
quizzes
too.
are yeah, the quizzes are right on my homepage, so you can take them there.
Awesome. All right, let's get into some kind of fun last call questions. What is the best party that you've hosted? I feel like we've talked about it, but maybe you
Yeah,
have another
that's
one.
no, that's definitely my favorite party right now. My favorite things party with all of the ladies in my neighborhood was definitely my favorite party.
Yeah, no, it sounds really fun. What has been the best community that you've been a part of, and what's made it so great?
Oh, the best community would be when we were in college. We lived on campus at a local university, and we lived in student housing, and it was such a fun community to be with. I think being students who have no money, who are short on sleep and time and money, and you get to share that struggle together. It was my favorite community so far that I've been a part of, and I'll never forget those years that we lived there. Those are lifelong friends, and we've all dispersed across the country now, and it's kind of crazy, but I stay connected with them more than any other friend groups I've had in the past.
Yeah, I always say those like trauma bonds cannot be broken.
Yep.
Like when you have to go through some tough stuff together, it's like forever. That's the best. Okay, finally, what is the best party hosting tip that you have?
I think I already mentioned it, but I will bring it back again, is assume your role as the hostess. Know that you can go first and you can be in charge. If it's really unfamiliar territory for you, that's okay. Just know that if you want to host and you want to be a phenomenal hostess, you can. You can do it. You can be the one to go first. And the more you host, the better you're going to get at it and the more fun it's going to be. So I would definitely, that would probably be my number one.
That's a great tip and great encouragement. So, Erin, thanks so much. This has been fun. And I know, like I said, we're all going to go try and communicate better now.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so much fun.